All righty. Well, it looks like we are right at 3 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Rebecca Mathews, and I am so thrilled and grateful to be with you today to talk about a really important topic, which is finding peace in the storm, a crash course in self-compassion. We have been living through so many hard things, so many storms. To just list off the ones we've experienced globally, which include a pandemic and the outcomes of that. Many have experienced loss and illness, economic destruction and impact. Add to that social struggles, political uprisings, in addition to everyday storms that impact people individually or within a community. We have been inundated with storms. And our goal today is to acknowledge the fact that we're still in storms. We are in the middle of storms and they continue. And to create space for developing self-compassion as a way of leveraging strength in the storm. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. Our goal is to share with you about what self-compassion is, to define it, to describe it, to make it a little bit more tangible, to talk about how do you do that when you're in the midst of the storm? How do you develop or how do you strengthen your self-compassion in the middle of the storm? And then we want to create space for you all to have an opportunity to experience increased self-compassion as part of this presentation. So we'll be doing exercises with the intention of developing further self-compassion as a way, as a gift, as a space to give you a temporary refuge from the storms that you're in. So thank you very much for joining us. We're excited to have you and to be here. So we'll start off just introducing who we are. So like I said, I'm Dr. Rebecca Mathews. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I am a counselor at heart. So I have worked in the field as a counselor for 15 years. And when the pandemic began, I was actually working in a hospital setting as a counselor and feel the pains and ills of those of you that are doing the hard work. During a pandemic, I transitioned to a full-time faculty role rather than doing adjunct work that I had been doing ahead of time, and have the experiences that come along with that as well. Self-compassion is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's become something that I have become an advocate for during this time that I didn't necessarily have ahead of time. So if some of you are joining us and you think that it might be froofy or you think that it's not that big of a deal, I was once you, I understand. I hope that we can have an experience to change your mind a little bit. And I'll allow our other presenters to introduce themselves as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Hickman. I'm currently an assistant professor at Texas A&M Commerce. I was previously an elementary school counselor and elementary teacher, so I love working with children and adolescents. And as a perfectionist people pleaser who tends to be very hard on herself, I love this topic and I'm thrilled to be presenting with you today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mignon Jambon. I am a licensed professional counselor, board certified supervisor. I have been practicing for over 15 years. I am currently a doctoral student at Texas A&M University Commerce. I work at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I am the medical liaison over the Behavioral Health Case Management Department, which is just a fancy title that means I really want the medical and mental piece to be together, that comorbidity piece, to kind of mesh a little bit better than it has in the past. And this topic is as near and dear to me. I'm like some of you others where I know we tend to be a little hard on ourselves, especially when it's during a pandemic. And I've had to remind myself of that we're in a pandemic. It's okay to have a freak out every once in a while. So hopefully you guys will enjoy. If you have any questions, just please feel free to put it in the chat.
So before we jump into things, I would love for us to have a conversation all together about what is your understanding of what self-compassion is and what is your experience with self-compassion. Now, my hope is that during this time that we're together, you're employing all those really important self-care tricks and tips that you are moving if you need to move, that you have your camera on if you're comfortable, that you've got your camera off if you need some space for your eyes. But we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to unmute and share, or put in the chat what's your understanding and experience with self-compassion.
So in the chat, we have that someone had written, thank you, Ms. Shand. My understanding of self-compassion is having patience and grace with yourself, particularly during challenges or difficult times. We have being kind, patient, forgiving yourself, giving yourself permission to be human, being kind to yourself, being able to forgive yourself the same way you may forgive others, and taking care of self, forgiveness, giving yourself the grace that you give to others. These are great, guys. It's usually easier to show compassion to others than it is myself. It takes more intention to bring myself compassion.
Love those. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I appreciate the idea of the intentionality behind self-compassion. I love the phrase, giving yourself permission to be human. Isn't that a funny thing? That resonated with me because I actually just had a conversation with my counselor this week about that I was giving myself permission to be human. And it's funny because, you know, spoiler alert, I am human. And so I'm giving myself permission to be who I am, and to make mistakes, which we do, which is important. And I saw we had some additional things in the chat about putting the mask on yourself first, which is really important. And as a counselor, compassion comes easy, yet self-compassion takes intention. It includes no judgment and forgiveness. What a beautiful summary of it includes no judgment. So let's talk a little bit more about what is self-compassion.
So we'd like to start by just kind of defining self-compassion and breaking down the components. We have done a lot of reading on Kristin Neff's work around self-compassion. I see her as a self-compassion guru, and I really love reading her research. It's just really cool. It's just a great body of work that she has formed around self-compassion. And so someone mentioned that self-compassion is easy with others, but not so easy to turn it towards ourselves. And so compassion for self is the same as having compassion for others. When we notice another suffering and we respond to their pain, and as counselors and helpers, we do that naturally. We're very good at taking care of others. We're very good at noticing someone else's suffering. So think about what that's like. When we notice that someone else is in pain or suffering, it is natural for us to feel warmth and caring and to want to help that person in some way. And we, of course, offer kindness and understanding. And when people are struggling or they've made mistakes, we don't beat other people up and say, you're such a failure. I can't believe you did that. We do the opposite, right? We are understanding, we don't judge them harshly, and we understand that being an imperfect person is part of the shared human experience. But with self-compassion, we have to take all of those things that we do so naturally with others, and to act that same way towards yourself. And instead of telling yourself to suck it up and everything's going to be okay, you pause and you say to yourself, this is really hard right now. This is really difficult. How can I comfort and how can I care for myself in this moment? So taking those things that we do so naturally for other people and just turning it around towards ourselves. And a lot of you said in the chat that it takes some intention to do that. And that's our goal for today, to just help us all to intentionally show compassion towards ourselves. And like I said, when I was introducing myself, in a self-deprecating way, but I really meant that I'm very good at judging and criticizing all of my own weaknesses and shortcomings. I'm an expert at it. I love doing it. It's an Olympic sport for me. But self-compassion, yes, aren't we all? Self-compassion means that we try to feel kindness and understanding toward ourselves when we're confronted with those personal struggles that we all have, whether they're work struggles or personal struggles. Instead of beating ourselves up and saying, you know, all of the things that we say to ourselves, we're kind and understanding. But most importantly, having self-compassion means that you're honoring and accepting your own humanity, the fact that you're a human being. And something that Dr. Mathews said in the beginning, spoiler alert, we're all human. So we all need to intentionally try to have compassion towards ourselves. And we'll let Mignon talk about the components of self-compassion.
So there are actually 3 components to self-compassion that Neff talks about. The first of which is self-kindness instead of self-judgment and criticism, which is we easily go to. So what I want you to think about in terms of that is just think awareness. Okay, we got to just be aware of it before we can do anything about it. We're all imperfect. We've talked about this, and we all experience difficulties in life. That's inevitable, right? We're going to have these things that are going to happen. So we want to look at that self-kindness piece before we do the self-judgment and criticism. So again, be aware. Okay, so think awareness. The second component is this common humanity instead of isolation. So on this one, basically what you want to think about is just acknowledging those feelings. Instead of you saying I'm the only one that makes mistakes, this is the only thing that ever happens, it's always me, to understand that we all have this type of experience, that we're not alone in what we do and things that happen to us, that others have that same experience. So again, think acknowledging those feelings as a second step. And then the third step is mindfulness instead of over-identification with painful thoughts and emotions. And what this is think the word balance, okay? Think balance, think the shared experience. We want to be able to observe our thoughts and feelings and what's going on with us without denying them, but also not getting caught in that self-pity piece that sometimes people can get really stuck in, right? So being mindful of those things, having a balance of all of these 3 components. And so Donna's going to take some of these and break them down a little bit more for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with self-kindness, it's just the ability to be gentle and understanding with ourselves, especially when we're going through some sort of struggle, some sort of turmoil, and asking yourself, do you speak to yourself like you would speak to a friend? And I find myself using this strategy a lot, especially when I can hear myself talk, which is very, very critical. And I think about my friends or my family members who I love so much. Would I ever say those words to them that I'm saying to myself? I wouldn't. And so sometimes it's good for me to remind myself that I'm not showing self-kindness when I'm beating myself up about things I've done wrong. And then practicing self-kindness is just acknowledging that we all are in pain sometimes. We all struggle, and to offer comfort. And so it's just a practice that, like we said, it needs to be intentional. It doesn't just happen automatically, because some of us are very good at slipping into that not very self-kind self-talk. And then common humanity just talks about that we should recognize that our failings, our sufferings, our imperfections are all part of the human experience. And the more that we can be vulnerable and transparent with other people and share our own struggles, the better it feels. And I know for myself, when I hear someone that's vulnerable and transparent, I immediately feel more connected to that person. So when we practice that principle, it shows that we see our own pain and our own inadequacies and our own failures as just part of the human experience. Not that there's something wrong with us, we're crazy, we're alone in our experience, no one else feels this way. Everyone feels this way. And that we see the suffering of others as part of their human experience as well. And then mindfulness is a practice that is so helpful for self-compassion. A mindfulness is just being aware of your feelings without avoiding or ruminating or over-identifying with them. I like the analogy of when you're at the airport. I know a lot of us haven't been at the airport in a while, but when you're at the airport and you're watching the luggage go by on the little conveyor belt, mindfulness is watching them go by without picking them up and unpacking them. And I love that analogy. So instead of engaging in behaviors that numb those feelings, like picking up your phone and doom scrolling or whatever, mindfulness is saying, it's okay to have those feelings. I'm having these feelings right now, and I'm just acknowledging that I'm having them non-judgmentally. So we're just observing what is going on inside of us when we practice mindfulness. And if you've looked at, after this presentation, if you wanted to look at Kristen Neff's website at selfcompassion.org, she has tons and tons of research on self-compassion and the benefits of self-compassion. But most of the research points towards the fact that the intentional practice of self-compassion can lead to positive outcomes. And there was one study in particular that showed it used several different measures, and it found that self-compassion had a significant positive association with self-report measures of happiness, optimism, positive affect, wisdom. These are all great things. And it showed a significant variance towards those positive outcomes when people were practicing self-compassion. And it also had a significant negative association with negative affect and negative traits such as neuroticism. Those things went down as self-compassion went up. And so we wanted to take a minute. I got a little over enthusiastic and I already sent this in the chat, but there's a self-compassion scale that we would like for you guys to take. And so we'll give you a couple of different options. I created one in Google Forms so that you could take it online if you wanted to. And we will delete the responses, of course. But I've also sent the file if you'd like to take it, if you'd like to just pull up the PDF, I've sent the file and I'm sending the link. But if you wouldn't mind just taking about 3 minutes to read the self-compassion scale and take it, and then we'll debrief a little bit.
We'll take just another minute to give you a chance to finish up.
So as you're finishing up, there's actually several different forms of this. There's one for for adolescent clients. There's one for adults. There's a short form and a long form. Would you mind sharing in the chat, or feel free to unmute and share just what was it like for you to take that assessment, to read those statements?
A little bit of a gut punch.
Mm-hmm. One reaction that I had when I took it, and I've taken it a couple of times, is it broke my heart a little bit, honestly, to read some of the statements and hear how non-self-compassionate I can be.
I see some comments in the chat of having thought that you were more compassionate then maybe you thought that you were having a reality check and realizing that you're having a hard time forgiving yourself. And Sharon, you're doing better than you thought you were, which is a nice reality check as well, right?
Thank you so much for being willing to participate in that. I know that sometimes it can be hard to look at ourselves and really be honest about how we're feeling, but we appreciate you being willing to participate in that with us. And what we'd like to do now is just talk about how we can take some of the things we've been talking about and translate them into action.
Thank you, Donna. And thank you, as Donna said, thank you for being willing to have some introspection and to build some awareness. I think for me, as things are starting to change, the tone of the pandemic is shifting a little bit, and I hear people talking about when things open up and when life goes back to normal. And I find myself thinking sometimes, but I'm still in the middle of it. I don't feel like I'm on the other end of the storm. I feel like I'm still getting rained down on. And if you are having a similar experience, this is for you. Let's talk about how do you do this in the moment. So I think the first thing to recognize is that when we are experiencing pressure from life circumstances, pressure from our own internal process, that's when the cracks reveal themselves. That's when we become mindful and aware of maybe some weaknesses that were always there, but they didn't rise to the surface. And this is really where the application of self-compassion can come in and help with some of those cracks. As we've already talked about, developing self-compassion skills in the midst of a depressive episode and in the midst of experiencing anxiety can help to reduce the symptomology of those things. There have been a lot of studies of the use of self-compassion with people that are experiencing physical ailments and chronic pain sufferers, and that in the midst of having these experiences, learning self-compassion skills and applying them reduces the pain threshold and level that they're experiencing. So we know that this is not just a preventative measure. It's not just something that you can do ahead of time. And if you happen to get hit by a storm, you're like, I'm out of luck. We know that it can be developed in the moment and can be effective when developed in the moment. What's wonderful about self-compassion and what can be hard about self-compassion is that it is action. It is intentionality, as many of you have already talked about, that it is the work that is done, and sometimes the work before the work that needs to be done. The self-compassion, when we think about it and that it's compassion focused internally, that requires that we focus and that we be willing to have it internally, which can be effort. What I think is wonderful about this space that we're in as we think about how do we have compassion for ourselves is we recognize and honor the bravery of clients that have gone before, that we have asked to do this. We have asked our clients that in their times of stress and struggle to be open to receiving psychoeducation about various skills, to be willing to practice things with us, and that we can do it still. So if you're doing client work, this is something you're asking your clients to do. If you're an educator, you might be asking your students to practice, to be willing to experiment, to develop some self-compassion. And that we can ask this of ourselves as well. And yet we don't have to do it alone. This is not a physician heal thyself experience. We can reach out for support and get the help that we need to develop self-compassion in the spaces that we need it.
So just a few things just to kind of remember, to expand a little bit on what Dr. Mathews said. Just remember the whole acknowledging and accepting yourself while embracing ourselves with that kindness and care, because that's what we're asking of our clients, of our students, but also of ourselves. So just remember, that's how we're going to do these things, is just to have that awareness that I spoke about earlier. And remember that when we are overwhelmed with things, when things happen, right, we need to think in terms of what is realistic to handle and to do, and also what is supportive. So in terms of, say, your clients, if they are overwhelmed and, you know, you are talking about a skill is throwing them over the edge, they're like, okay, I can't deal with adding one more thing to my plate right now. So now what do I do? It's being realistic, right? And what is it that they already have in place, possibly, that we could maybe just change a little bit? You know, do they already have a good support system, and do they already talk to people? Okay, well, it might be that they start doing that a little bit more. Things like that can be done realistically, supportively. I heard a great one this morning from Dr. Mathews, where there was a student who was so overwhelmed with personal and school that thought about dropping out from the program or dropping out for the semester. And Dr. Mathews taking that moment, right, and stepping back and saying, well, hey, let's just see where we are right now in the semester, and looking at what's there. What have you turned in? What hasn't been turned in? What is your grade now? What if you don't do anything else for the semester? What would your grade be? And okay, if we're fine with the B, and guess what? Maybe you're just going to do this one paper. That's all you'll have to do instead of maybe 3 papers, right? And then you can still manage, right? So I can't imagine what that, as a doc student right now, I can't imagine how awesome that would be when you're looking at all of this personal angst that's happening, plus your school and papers that are due and things like that. But then having someone help you be realistic in what is possible and realistic for you to do without, making yourself more sick and overwhelmed, but also being supportive and keeping you in that space. So those are 2 really good examples of things that we can do to help be realistic and supportive. So again, it's about making space for somebody. It's about making space for yourself. Depending on who's doing the self-compassion, is it for yourself or is it for others? And leveraging those skills, leverage skills that people already have or use. Sometimes it's just a matter of being creative sometimes and looking at what they're already doing, or what are you already doing? And then what can we do to mold that to fit what's happening in the moment right now? So it's a balancing act, but it is a way that you can balance and be successful.
So, hey guys, let's do some stuff here. So we're gonna do some experiential activities. What I would invite you to do is to participate to the degree that you feel safe and comfortable. We know that you're in various spaces, and so feel free to engage in the way that you can, and observe if you don't feel like you can engage. But we're going to walk through 3 different exercises to help strengthen self-compassion.
This one is one of my favorites. I do with clients a lot. I need to start doing it more with myself. And so I call this just being a friend, but you can get a piece of paper, you can write this down, but think about a time when a close friend or family member was struggling. How did you respond to that person? And write down what it is maybe you typically do, or what you typically do or say, and include the tone of voice. So the tone of voice is really, really important with this piece. So that's step 1. Then as you're ready, the next step of this is to look at yourself, okay? Think about when you're struggling. Has there been something that you've struggled with even today, right? That you can think of easily. How did you respond to yourself? So write down what it is that you say to yourself and include the tone of your voice that you do. So now take a look at what you've written. Is there a difference between the two? And if there is a difference, ask yourself, why is there a difference? Okay, are there factors or fears that make it different? And how you respond to yourself versus others? Is there a reason why? Or is there a difference? You might have some that if there's not a difference, you're just as hard on yourself and you're just as hard on everybody else around you. That could be honest. And that happens a lot with clients. I see that a lot with clients, that they realize that they're hard on others, especially family members, children, as much as they are to themselves. And they didn't really realize it until they did this. And then what you can do is you can actually write down how things might change if you responded the way you did to others to yourself. Being that hopefully you're more self-compassionate to others. And if you are, how would your life be better and different? And again, something to think about when we were talking about leveraging and making space, but keeping it doable, right? This would be a great place that you could insert that, right? Where if you know that you respond differently to others, you're harder on yourself. And let's just say you have a friend that you talk to weekly, right? Maybe that's something that you do is you talk to the friend to remind you that when you're saying things that are negative, right, to point them out to you. That's what I mean by leveraging what's already there. So that way it's not like adding another level, right? So this is one of my favorite ones to do.
Thank you, Mignon. I noticed as I was writing it down that I had some judgment as I noticed how I speak to others and how I want to speak to others is often impacted by my own stress level and what I'm experiencing. And so I had to notice that and then allow myself to experience that without the judgment. So thank you so much for that. We're going to talk next a little bit more about self-compassion. Donna?
Yeah, so this activity you can do anytime, day, night. If you wake up in the middle of the night and can't sleep, it'd be a great time to do it then. I'm also sending a link for this activity in the chat so you can follow along if you'd like. And this is just called a self-compassion break. So what we'd like you to do is to think of a situation in your life that is causing you stress right now. A situation in your life that's difficult, that's bothering you. And when you think about the situation, notice if you can feel the stress in your body. Can you feel the stress in your shoulders? Can you feel your jaw tense? Can you feel anxiety and tension. And when you find yourself in that place, to intentionally change your self-talk. And when you do these things, it will utilize those three components of self-compassion that we've talked about. So the first thing you can say to yourself is, this is a moment of suffering. And that's a perfect example of mindfulness, just recognizing that you're having a moment of suffering, not judging it, just acknowledging it. And some other options you could say to yourself, this hurts. This is stressful. Or simply, ouch. Anything that can bring to mind the acknowledgement of the pain and the acknowledgement of the suffering. And then you can say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. And that recalls the common humanity component of self-compassion. And other options you could say are, other people feel this way. I'm not alone. We all struggle in our lives. And if you felt comfortable, you could put your hands over your heart and feel the warmth of your hands on your chest, or any other soothing touch that feels right to you. And you can say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. And you can also ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? Is there a phrase that speaks to you or resonates with you? Some examples are, may I give myself the compassion that I need? May I learn to accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? And may I be patient? And this is something that's very simple that you could do anytime throughout the day. So if you wanted to, you could even write like on a sticky note or on your notes app on your phone, those three phrases that you can say to yourself. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life, and may I be kind to myself. And then I think Rebecca is going to lead us in a kinder voice.
Thank you so much, Donna. This one is similar to the first one, but a little bit different. And so what I'd like to invite you to do is that wherever you are, to sit comfortably. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, have a soft gaze somewhere else in the room. And allow yourself to exhale. Exhale the stress of the day. And continue to breathe normally. And I'm going to walk you through a series of steps. So I'd like for you to imagine in your mind a recent time where you were particularly harsh with yourself. And remember for a moment the words that you said to yourself. And notice in your body where you feel the impact of those words. Or the tension of those words. Continue to breathe. And I want you to next imagine in your mind somebody that loves you with all of their heart, as close to unconditional love as possible. But when you think of them, that you smile, that it brings your heart joy to be around them. If it's hard to think of a person in your life, thinking of a pet, of a higher power, something or someone that you know just loves you and embraces you with their warmth. And while you continue to breathe and with your eyes closed or having your soft gaze, imagine what it sounds like when they speak to you with love. What does the tone of their voice sound like? What does their loving touch feel like? What do their eyes look like when they look at you with love? What does it feel like in your body to feel their love? Now imagine that you were to tell this person who loves you unconditionally, who supports you, that you feel their warmth and love and safety from, of the mistake that you made earlier. What might they say to you in that moment? What would the tone of voice be? What would the look on their face entail as they're helping you in that moment? Imagine feeling their love and their support in that space. So as you continue to breathe and continue to feel their love, I'd like you to change the words so that it's you speaking to yourself with the same compassion, the same love, the same care that they have given you. Use words such as I and me. And speak to yourself with those same kind words directed at yourself. The same kind voice. Imagining yourself giving you that love. And as you continue to feel their love and that peace, take a deep breath and hold on to that love. And as you feel comfortable, go ahead and open your eyes and return your focus back to the screen. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing, either through unmuting your mic or by dropping in the chat, what that experience was like for you? Calm, relaxing. In the spirit of noticing, did you notice a difference to how you talk to yourself versus to how your loved one might talk with you? Did you notice a difference in how your body might feel that way? Thank you for your willingness to practice with us, to give yourself the gift of compassion in that moment. What's wonderful about self-compassion is that it's a skill. It's developmentally possible to build. And because it's a skill, it can be developed line on line, piece by piece by piece by piece. There's no need to build Rome in one day, that it can be small and steady, that it can fit into your schedule. It can be a 2-minute practice. It can be a 10-minute practice. It can be something that you do before you check your email for the day. It can be something you work on as you do your nightly meditations or while you do your exercising, whatever helps you in that space. And that as you do it, that you will notice increased peace and calm and clarity. To support your practice of self-compassion, we've included some resources that might be helpful for you as you're learning how to build your skill or strengthening the skills that you already have, that might be helpful for you. I'd love to hear from you all. What self-compassion skills do you use already? What do you find is helpful for you? What can you share to support others in their development?
I like to check with myself if I would be a person, or if I would be giving somebody else grace, or if I'm willing to ask somebody for grace, if I'll give myself grace in that moment instead, or in addition to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I do something similar to what was kind of discussed about earlier about like a student being overwhelmed. I give myself permission to not have to be an A at my job, at being a parent, at being a business owner every day. I give myself permission to be a C sometimes and be okay with that.
Candace, I love that so much, that idea of giving yourself permission ahead of time, not just I ran out of time and I didn't have enough time to get it done, but I'm going to be intentional that I'm going to get a B today. I'm going to get a B on how I'm doing this activity or this project that I've developed, and I'm okay with that. As I grade myself, it's 80%, not 100%, and I'm going to use that 20% for something else.
We haven't mentioned it too much, but I know a lot of y'all I know are parents, and there's so much going on in your lives. And I know for me, sometimes it's hard. I feel I put too much pressure on myself for being tired even, right? Like how dumb is that? When you're tired, you're tired. But I feel like I shouldn't be tired. Like I should be able to be Superwoman, right? Which, yeah, that doesn't exist. That's why it's in a comic book. But even for parents, right? It's okay if, your kids eat pizza tonight. It's okay if those things happen. So I think sometimes it's nice to be able to say, it's okay. No one's gonna die. No one's gonna, if the right outfit isn't on your child at school that day, they're still gonna get through school that day. It's just kind of putting things and keeping things in a perspective and giving yourself, like the other girls that I love so much too, giving yourself just that grace.
Thank you for that, Mignon. I know that's something that as an educator, I've had to hold on to. It's easy when I get a lot of emails from students who are very concerned about something that requires a quick action, and yet I recognize that I don't have the ability to respond. And I've had to shift and remind myself, this is not a suicide assessment client concerned that if I don't act right away, that it really could be dangerous. This is uncomfortable for them, and I don't want them to experience discomfort. And I've given everything I can give today, and this is going to have to go on to tomorrow's list, and that's okay. And being willing to do that with ourselves. Candace, I love that you gave your permission to yourself for your child to have mismatched outfits.
And he loves it, which makes me a happier parent.
Yeah, sometimes I think the piece that as a practicing practitioner is the deep-seated internalized hatred and loathing people have for themselves. I think in the short term, of course, this works, to kind of get them past their immediate crisis or the immediate thought or what have you. But sometimes breaking down through some of that internalized trauma, whatever they have going on, that has allowed them to believe that they're not worthy of love, worthy of anything good in their lives, is kind of difficult to get through.
That is such a profound and important statement, and absolutely true. And I think that one of the gifts that self-compassion work gives us and clients is a safe space to begin that journey. The trauma work has to be done. The hard work of counseling has to be done. And it doesn't have to be done outside of self-compassion. It can be done with the support of self-compassion to help undo some of those oftentimes systemically amplified ways in which they might feel like they are without value. And sometimes the focus on, rather than I have worth and I have value, might feel painful to clients. It might be so against how they feel about themselves, but they can focus on the common humanity piece, or having additional awareness of their experience rather than kind of accessing some of those things that might not feel helpful in that moment. we are at time. Thank you very much for your engagement, your participation. Please contact us, reach out to us with questions that you might have. We look forward to you having increased self-compassion in your own life and the work that you do, the good work that you do with clients and with students and supervisees to help them have self-compassion in theirs. Thank you so much for attending today.